to Classical Ideas. This is Greg Soden. Something I absolutely love is following the work of past guests of this show, many of whom become friends. Back on episode 36 of Classical Ideas, I had a wonderful conversation on a life spent in Chan Buddhism with Guo Gu, a Buddhist teacher, scholar, and writer who grew up in the 1980s New York City punk rock scene. It is my pleasure to welcome Guo Gu back on the show for episode 177, where we discuss some of the many remarkable things he has been up to since. Guo Gu is the founder of the Tallahassee Chan Center and is also the guiding teacher for the Western Dharma Teacher Training Course at the Chan Meditation Center in New York and the Dharma Drum Lineage. He is one of the late Master Sheng Yen's senior and closest disciples and assisted him in leading intensive retreats throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia. Guo Gu has edited and translated a number of Master Sheng Yen's books from Chinese to English. He is also a professor of Buddhism and East Asian religions at Florida State University in Tallahassee. This conversation focuses on two topics. First, we discuss Guo Gu's recent leadership in relation to Dharma Relief. Dharma Relief is the first platform that brings together different Buddhist traditions, teachers, and practitioners to support and create sustainable living in North America. One of the amazing projects Dharma Relief has undertaken this year is the purchase and distribution of PPE during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under Guo Gu's leadership, Dharma Relief has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from thousands of donors, coordinated volunteers across all of North America, and provided PPE to over 170 hospitals from Puerto Rico to the U.S. to Canada. The second part of our conversation discusses Guo Gu's forthcoming book, The Essence of Chan, A Life and Practice According to the Teachings of Bodhidharma, coming out October 25th, 2020 from Shambhala Publications. If you are interested in some more of his mainstream work, you can check out his writing for Lion's Roar magazine. His pieces, You Are Already Enlightened, Exposing, Embracing, Responding, and Letting Go, from Lion's Roar are particularly fantastic, in my opinion. His book, Passing Through the Gateless Barrier from Shambhala Press, is also quite a fantastic journey. It was a real pleasure having Guo Gu back on the show for episode 177 after his appearance on episode 36. I cannot believe over 140 episodes have passed. Without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with Guo Gu on his return visit to Classical Ideas. Guo Gu, welcome back to Classical Ideas.
Thank you, Greg, for your invitation.
It is so wonderful to have you back. Before we dive into the conversation about your new book, I would love to know about some of the work that you've been doing with an organization called Dharma Relief during the COVID-19 pandemic. You've been doing some incredible work, and I am just curious to hear about your progress with the organization, what it does, and how you have been a service to your community in the last several months.
Thank you. So Dharma Relief is a network, a platform to bring together Dharma teachers, centers from various traditions. And it's something lacking in North America, at least, like a platform where teachers come together. Sure, in the past, there have been events episodically, people come together and so on, conferences, platforms, but not like a sustained network. So when the pandemic started, Dharma teacher friends, I know everyone is doing their own thing at their local center. And I felt that the power and the effect is so limited because every one of us just limited to our own center, try to bring some peace of mind to people. But there was nothing really material that people were actually doing. There was nothing you can do. So it's kind of like this helplessness. And Dharma Drum Mountain in New York have uh, began to collect money to purchase masks, also on a small scale, just our branch in New York City. Right? So, and because under the Dharma Drum Mountain umbrella, all the chapters and branches are mostly Chinese community. So this effort was basically within the Chinese, and they had some people had contact with mainland China producers, manufacturers, and we have branch over there. So people on the ground who can actually check the quality, check the paperwork for FDA approval, all that stuff. So it was, but so I approached Dharma Drum and said, hey, we can do that. Let's expand it to all Dharma centers. I mean, everyone need help. This is something that we can all come together and do. And they're just so overwhelmed with the paperwork and all that we can't undertake that project. So I said, I'll do it. Yeah. They had limited contact with Western Dharma centers anyway. So I'll do it. So I gather my students, small handful of students, build a website, contact Shambhala, Lions Roar, which through those venues I published. You guys want to sponsor this? I said, yes, because I know they had mailing list.
Yeah.
They had the media.
Yeah.
So contacted Dharma teachers from different traditions, Ringzai Zen, Soto, Tibetan, Vipassana, and everyone thought this is exactly what we should be doing. They want to do it. It's something that they want to do, but they couldn't because they didn't have the right contact, on the ground. And there was something narrowly defined, very practical, and cut through all the red tape, all the politics. Narrowly defined means we aim to fill the lacuna between US manufacturers refashioning themselves, like General Motor, like car companies, refashioning themselves to make masks, between the time they can start producing them and this lag time where the US is not importing masks from mainland China, which produced over 50% of all the medical supplies on Earth prior to COVID-19. So it's been doing this, right?
Yeah.
But US, China trade war, anyway,
Sure.
US is not doing that. So China's shipping to UK, China's shipping to everywhere else except basically North America, right? So this lag time, we were figuring maybe 2 months, maybe a month and a half before the US can catch up to mass produce PPEs, personal protective gear, equipment, including masks and so on. So it was short, narrowly defined, small project. We can all come together. We can actually do something, raise funds and buy. We had the whole thing set up. Instead of mass shipments, we ship individual boxes from the manufacturing company directly. Then that will cut out taxes. See, and all the kind of checking points. So we started doing that, and we aimed also very small. Let's raise $100,000. We got that in 2 days. So
Nice.
we thought, okay, let's see, 300,000. We got that in a week. I was like, all right, let's 500,000. So we were able to purchase what we got eventually over 600,000 K. 600K, 600,000 over. We got over 1.2 million masks. And when we were at the peak of this momentum, we got the attention of humanitarian organizations, MedShare and Flexport. They wanted to co-sponsor us. They ran out of masks. Flexport is a shipping, humanitarian shipping company, nonprofit. MedShare is a nonprofit recycling and excess medical supply throughout North America, mainly the US, but they also ship to Canada as well. So we partnered with them to have free shipment because we were paying UPS, which is an arm and a leg,
Sure.
in a whole box. Hundreds of hospitals in US, each one with their own label, and so we did that. That was successful, and then the US continued to have this implicit conflict with things coming out of mainland China by preventing the PPEs from coming in. Extra care, of course, there's reason for that. They want to make sure it's not full of coronavirus. Right?
Sure.
Extra care, and Chinese had to, have extra care. So everything delayed. Thunderstorm here. So, long story short, we were able to just a few days ago, received the final shipment. We had to go through sea instead of air eventually for that amount. And so that's where we're at. But then that spurred on, this pandemic led to other things as racism, anti-racist movement, a whole one after another. People were getting killed, murdered, police brutality. In the midst of this pandemic, and that network that we have already established, with the help of some of my students, we thought, okay, we gotta utilize this network. Dharma Relief as a platform to bring together teachers to address social issues. So Dharma Relief 2 was born. DR2, which we are in the process. This is not so clear-cut as DR1.
Yeah.
Cut through politics, cut through all the red tape. Racism is very complicated, to say the least. And there's a long history of problems, and there's so many different angles, and it's politicized, highly politicized, from standpoint of individual life, from standpoint of institutional structures. But we live in samsara, and samsara is the arena of nirvana, of awakening. So this is where we dive in head first. Well, DR1's board members, group of Dharma teachers, except one, all of them are white. So DR2 cannot be led by a group of white Dharma teachers.
Yeah.
All have the same consensus. Otherwise, we will be perceived as hijacking. Hijacking Black Lives Matter again.
Sure.
So we started contacting Black Dharma teachers, leaders. For several years, Lions Roar and other Buddhist organizations have been hosting what is called a gathering. All the Black Dharma teachers, leaders, practitioners come together, have meetings and sharings and retreats. So I got the name list, went down one by one. So we have a group of Black Dharma teachers and leaders. Some of them are not teachers per se, like two are pastors who are practicing Buddhist.
Sure.
And some are therapists, not teachers, but practicing Buddhist. So got a group. So we're in the process of figuring out in what way are we able to still align with the mission of Dharma Relief, which is bring Dharma teachers and centers together to address racism or whatever social phenomena in an efficacious way, narrowly defined, something practical, cutting through politics. We thought about healing, trauma resiliency workshop, diversity workshop. So DR2 is becoming. We're still having a meeting this Thursday, so we don't know exactly how it's going to go. We're taking the time to educate ourselves, to understand the history, the sociological dimensions, the personal stories of racism in the midst of all this. But so far, it's shaping towards DR2 raising funds and then using the funds to offer trainings for Dharma teachers. And there'll be a process. Trauma resiliency workshop. Right? And some of these workshops, you can get a license from it. Like you actually get some kind of
like a credential.
Acronym behind your name, like a comma,
Oh, sweet.
SRS, yeah. So it's a long process. Training is not like one workshop. It's like 8 weeks or longer, months. Right?
Sure.
So diversity training, communication skill training. So all the qualifications that will allow a Dharma teachers when they return to their centers to begin providing, and some of them have done a great job so far, providing a safe space for the BIPOC community to come and practice Dharma and feel they don't have to explain to these white people, all kinds of things. They're pretty exhausted doing that. So
absolutely.
A place where they feel safe.
Yeah.
So when you think about what would make them feel safe, you can't really rely on them reading books and educating themselves. So they have to kind of go through the training by professionals. So it's kind of like an expedient means, if you will, skillful means,
Sure.
a skill set to train them in this quality, which is not traditionally part of Buddhist training. I mean, we're trained to, meditate, insight, understand Buddhist teachings, integrate in daily life. But some of the subtleties of implicit biases and discriminations, the institutional structures, we're not trained to be like sociologists to cut through the veil and see through the institutional things. So this will be a kind of a skillful means, like a bodhisattva skillful mean training, so they can do that. And then it will continue as a platform after the training, doing the training to provide Zoom, online dialogues, sharings of stories, and even workshops. Once they get the licensing, they can actually do this online, hosting different stuff. So DR2 will play a prominent role in that. Right?
So you're envisioning this being like a national, maybe a global organization of Dharma teachers connected all over the world, right?
Yes. So far, I mean, I'm all for effectiveness.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not that ambitious, like a global. Just like DR1, it's North America. Bodhi Bhikkhu,
yeah.
my friend, global relief. That's global, addressing things, but they're not doing something on the level of kind of what's happening here. So this fills this void.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Do you have like a timeline for launching these trainings? What is the scope of this project looking like on your end, like logistically?
So far, we are still in the process of designing and working with one another because many of these teachers don't know one another. Sure, the DR1 teachers, we work together. The DR2, so it needs to be time. It needs to be
Yeah.
time to build trust. In the meantime, maybe in a month or two, we'll have the DR2 website. Hopefully, the agenda will be set. So we have, and then we can build a website, right? DR2 website, and then we can fundraise.
Yeah.
In the meantime, provide informational videos, talks, something about hosting that, like a clearinghouse.
Sure.
And raise funds. And then 2021, start to have these workshops. Hopefully, we'll have enough funds. I mean, it would be great if we can train, say, 108, like a nice Buddhist number.
I love it.
108 Dharma teachers, the first wave to go through these trainings. And these trainings are expensive, so.
Sure. Well, and I also love the way you pointed out that, people go into teaching in general, just teaching. Like you're a teacher, I'm a teacher, you teach at a university, but as well as in your Chan Center. And, people go into teaching because they care about other people. But when we don't have specific kinds of trainings, we lack in our ability to reach all of our students. So to me, training these folks who want to become Dharma teachers so that they can more effectively reach everybody who wants to learn the Dharma is only going to open those teachings up to a much wider audience, which I think is super important and interesting on your part as well.
It's very important work because if you statistically examine Western Dharma teachers, putting aside ethnic Dharma centers, for example, all Vietnamese people, all Chinese people, all Japanese people. Putting aside those, just like westernized Dharma centers, I haven't do the math. I haven't done the math, but I'm guessing a very, very high percentage of that are run by white Dharma teachers, right? So it's not that we want to change the dynamics. We want to make sure everyone, every center, all the teachers have the skill set to be sensitive, open, receptive, friendly. At least within Buddha Dharma in the West, we will take the lead to provide more equitable, safe space for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color practitioners.
Awesome. I mean, this sounds like it could reshape the future of Dharma teaching in North America to me.
Yeah.
It sounds that big.
Yes.
And you're doing this on top of, your center, your day-to-day job, and this is like almost like a third career that you have accidentally stumbled into, it seems, just purely because you felt like this is something that needs to exist.
What needs to be done, what can be done. It's a kind of principle. Something that needs to be done, we may not be able to do. So we just do what we can.
Yeah.
We don't quibble about results. We just do what we can, even if we are able to do very little. In this process of learning, of interacting, sharing, it's already very, very valuable for everyone on board. And I just want to be clear, I'm not doing this alone. I have a group of students who are like bodhisattvas.
Awesome.
And there are, I'm 52. They're younger. They're like the millennials. And these people's energy, I'm telling you, like, their ability technologically, they're way surpass
Yeah.
what I'm able to do. So it is because of all of them and their skill set and their practice.
It's
That
like
Buddhist.
it's like back whenever punk rock kids in New York City would make their own flyers and put on their own shows. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I drew some of those flyers
Awesome.
for all the different CBGB shows. When Agnostic Front want to have a show, even when we're not on the bill, I used to draw it. You know,
I love it. I love it. Do you have any of
A7.
those? Do you have any of those originals still hanging out in some
I don't,
folders?
I don't have the originals, but they're floating around on Facebook. My
I love
brother
it.
and other people, and they share it. Scan images of it.
So cool. Well, Guogu, you also have a new book coming out. We last spoke in January of 2018 for Classical Ideas episode number 36. And I am closing in on episode 200 here really soon. I've been at it ever since you and I last spoke. And your new book, The Essence of Chan, A Guide to Life and Practice According to the Teachings of Bodhidharma, is coming out soon through Shambhala. Where were you in the process of putting together this book when we talked in January of 2018?
This is a reissue.
Tell me more.
Um, this book came out first as an ebook because it stemmed from a series of talks and transcribed, edited, polished. So it was short. I think series of 4 or 5 talks at the Tallahassee Chance group. It wasn't even a center yet. So it came out 2012. And it did okay, and by the request of many people, either contacting me or complaining to Shambhala directly, they want paperback. I guess people are just used to putting something in their hands.
Yeah.
So it's a reissue. Slight changes, tweak here and there, but basically it's the same book with a new cover. And so when we spoke, it was still an ebook. There was no plan of
Yeah.
putting it out. And this just happened last year. We thought maybe we should put it out as a book, and so that's what happened.
Gotcha. You open the book. I was reading through it this past week. You open the book with a discussion on the importance of cause and effect within Buddhist practice. Why did you choose to start the book in such a manner, with cause and effect leading the pages?
That just came from my talk,
Oh, good.
and I began the series of talk with. I still remember that talk must have been 2009. I think I still remember it. I began a talk because it was a very young group, group of small Chan practitioners. I didn't want to introduce these new practitioners. And here's an interesting part. We can expand that to Chan Zen practice in the West in general. I didn't want to introduce them Buddhist doctrine, on which the foundation of Chan was built in pre-modern time. So Chan is not separate from Buddhism. If you were to imagine visually, it would be like a pyramid. Fundamental Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Chan. So this is just a phenomenon that happened in China, by extension, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, different parts of East Asia. So the doctrine, the foundations are very important, but I don't want to introduce to these new practitioners the whole load of Buddhist doctrine and so on. But I want to choose the text that build the very basic foundation, sufficient to begin the practice.
Sure.
And that's why I chose that. So I began the series of talk with, all things come together because of causes and conditions. All things have their repercussions as their effect. So between cause and effect, what brings the cause, what leads the cause to an effect are conditions. Conditions not there, it will never lead to an effect. Conditions are there, and it will lead to a particular kind of effect. Just like if you have a seed cause. If you don't put water, the condition of water, sunlight, soil, it's a seed. It will never lead to an effect, blossoming of flowers, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you have not enough water, or too much water, too much sun, not enough sun, so whatever the conditions will shape the effect. It won't completely change, like apple seed will not change to banana tree. It's still basically apple tree, but maybe a weaker apple tree or a smaller or very strong, powerful tree. So it depends on conditions. That's what shapes things. And that's the genius of the Bodhidharma text. He spoke about practice and awakening, basically. And all the conditions that must be there to bring about the fruition of realizing our true nature, not something outside of us, just who we truly are. And that is the 4 practices. So the text is about 2 entries, 4 practices. Entry by principle, entry through practice. And through practice, there are these 4 things. So that's what the text is about. So just minimal teaching, doctrine, but essential cause and effect, cause and conditions. That's basically, if we boil down the teaching on awakening and practice. So it's a seminal text, and it was the right time to do it. And how I wanted to relate this to the broader Zen community, the Chan Zen or East Asian Buddhist community in the West, is that a lot of times you can say I chose that text as a critique to Zen practice as popularly conceived in the West. People that pick up these Barnes and Noble books, Chan masters shouting, beating people, crazy stuff, out of context. They have this imagined idea of what Zen practice is. That's so Zen. Different things. Yeah. So I wanted to use this text to reinsert just the modicum, just the essential part of doctrine right back into Chan and Zen practice. Right? Because of Chan's self-image. We're talking about pre-modern time, right? Ancient time, when he emerged, self-image as this is the 4 axioms, right? You asked this before. It's a transmission outside of doctrine, not dependent on words and language, directly pointing to the mind, seeing oneself nature, becoming a Buddha. Right? So that's a 4 Chan axiom. But this is built on the foundation of Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is built on the foundation of fundamental Buddhist principles. So Chan is that little peak at the top, you see. But when people take these four axioms literally, then they're actually divorcing themselves from the rich tradition of Buddha Dharma, you say. And literally don't depend on words and language, no need to study the scriptures, any doctrine. So I want to re-inject that, into people's understanding of Zen, and to place Chan Zen squarely within Buddha Dharma. Our actions has repercussions. Cause and effect. If we need to get anywhere in life, in practice, we must understand the workings of causes and conditions. The condition, again, back to the analogy. Apple seed, potential apple tree. In between cause and effect, conditions. So we need to learn how to recognize conditions, adapt to them, wait for them, and create the causes and conditions. See, so this was a beautiful text, very short text, and the book was my commentary to the text. That is sufficient. Of course, there are lofty Buddhist teachings and doctrines and so on, but this one sufficient to begin the path of practice.
Something that stands out to me about our first conversation is when we talked about you learning meditation when you were a very small boy. And I asked you for some advice on how to teach meditation to my then 4-year-old daughter, who is now almost 7. And you write about something in this new book about that I've never considered before within Buddhism. And that is the notion of our original state of freedom and how we are almost seeking a return back to that original state of freedom through practice. Do I have that right? Because it really resonated with me and made me tie these two threads to our first conversation and this conversation as well.
How did you tie it?
It's not tied yet. It's an uncertain, loose knot, and maybe if you explain to me if I have it right, maybe then I'll pull it tight.
Okay. Well, this very traditional Mahayana Buddhist teaching on intrinsic or original awakening is not an invention of Chan. It's not what's popularly perceived temporally, as if, at one time we used to be this awakened self, but due to social conditioning, all the stuff that we experienced, then we lost it, so we return. So not in a temporal sense that we return. It's right here, right now. So it's not in the past, it's in the present. And the meaning is that all the things that we have acquired, accumulated, our conditioning and so on, patterns of thought, habit, tendencies, vexations, they don't really define us. They've shaped us in a certain way, and there is a real history to it. But we're so much more than that right now. So the analogy I have is, it's like a room with different furniture. Yes, there is the reality of different furniture in the room. There's a sofa, there's chairs, there's cushions, there are books, there's all kinds of furniture. Some dilapidated, just not so useful. Some is actually harmful. And some very useful furniture. Let's call them all furniture. So yes, there's a real history to how the furnitures got there. No one has thrown these furniture in here. That's the karmic part. We have brought these furnitures in the room. But does that actually affect the spaciousness of the room? It doesn't matter if the room is cluttered or spick and span. The room is already spacious. So it's not a temporal sense. It's not that the room, used to be spacious and now it isn't. If you look superficially, it may be cluttered. The room may be cluttered. Yes, it isn't, right? But the potential and the very reason why it can be cluttered is because of the spaciousness, the openness. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna let that simmer a little bit as well when I'm thinking back on this conversation later on. Earlier I mentioned our mutual friend, Mato Moore. And in your book, you write about modern caricatures of Zen and Chan practice in the West. And I know that Mato has some very specific thoughts on the misconceptions and caricatures of Zen in the West. Do you care to comment on what you view as like some misconceptions and state how your text may offer some additional thoughts on this ongoing conversation within Western Buddhism?
Well, first of all, it is an ongoing process, conversation, if you will. So from that perspective, misconceptions, correct conceptions, it's a matter of perspectives. There's nothing really right or wrong. You can't really skip stages. Like, for example, a person learning. Yeah, there are some smart ones that jump grades, second grade, jump to fifth grade, whatever. But basically, it's you need a process, you see, from point A to point B. Right? So once you reach point B and you look back on all the points before, is that a mistake? No. Like your daughter, now she's 7, but before she's older. But even before that, when she didn't know how to walk, those mistakes, it's like, no, the mistakes are actually the ingredients of how she learned how to walk. So from that perspective, it's actually failures are the ingredients of success. Now she knows how to walk and run and jump, and you see what I'm saying? So there's all these meanderings, historical meanderings, like when Buddhism entered China. I'll get back to enter America later, but enter China. They were translating the Buddha as the great immortal through the lens of Taoism. That's their reference. So their lens to look at, okay, this must be a great immortal from the West. So what does he have to teach? He teach meditation too, because in China, there were already in existent meditative, hermetic traditions, contemplation. Long history. So when Buddhism came, it's like, wow, wait, let's check out their meditation system. So there's this blending, merging, and critiquing, and new shape Buddhism came out. So that's what we're witnessing here. So my first point is misconceptions. The misconceptions, yes, but only from certain standpoint. So it's just the need is just to clarify standpoint.
Yeah.
It's like climbing a hill, mountain biking. The vantage points. Here's the thing about standpoint. It's not one standpoint. The vista that you see, the horizon changes as you climb. So you can only assess it. It's not to say that something is harmful. It's okay. It's not to say that.
Yeah.
The only way to do it is to clarify the standpoints, plural form, and assess the situations. What needs to be done? What can be done? From the perspective of, getting back to Bodhidharma, cause and effect, causes and conditions. Does this action potentially lead to suffering, harm as the effect? Or it may not be Buddha Dharma the way we knew it, but it's benefiting people. You see?
Yeah.
Like the mindfulness movement.
Yeah.
They taken Buddhism and the technique, divorced it out of the ethical context of karma and causes and conditions, made it into a technique in social sciences, right? Medical field, psychology, social work, whatever. Now, so you assess it from the point of view of cause and effect. They decontextualize it, place it in another context. What context? Neuroscience. The effect of that, is that harmful for people or is it not? So it led to, harmful for people or not also has a standpoint. Here's a standpoint, right? So to what extent is it harmful? Right? To what extent is it, from what vantage point is it actually beneficial? Does it stray off so much that it's really harm? Or is it in the shades of gray that we can't really see? But so far, at least, it's actually popularizing Buddhism. Or is it, it's a medical field? Buddhism is infiltrating, Buddhist teaching infiltrating mainstream culture, shaping consciousnesses. So some people may see that, and I know some teachers see that as just blasphemy. It's not Buddha Dharma. But some other teachers see that as it's beneficial. It's a necessary step. Just like the Taoists, when they encounter Buddhism, they think it's a Taoist practice, just from those Indians in the West, their version of it. And their great teacher is the great immortal. We have our immortals, they have their immortals. So they've turned and twisted and decontextualized and refabricated Buddhism through centuries. We're just witnessing this. So Mado, for example, critiques in his book Christianity, Christianization of Buddhism, or I think I'm paraphrasing wrong, or in that sense, bring different elements of that to Buddhism, and he wants to distinguish it, right? And also those atheists who are clearly kind of people that have left the camp, the Christian camp, and they just want to jump into Buddha Dharma. So both of these, we have to assess. So he has his positions, which are very good. It's all a matter of standpoints and cause and effect, causes and conditions.
Well, I love reading your book and his book. I've been reading them almost side by side recently, and those lines just caught my attention as a way that those kind of works are linked, and I appreciated it as well.
I think part of what he's trying to do, and part of what I'm trying to do, is this. In certain circumstances, we need to demarcate what is actually Buddha Dharma. But it's always circumstantial. So it depends on causes and conditions. The conditions in this context, okay, we need to carve out that no, Buddhism is not therapy. No, it's not. Right? But in other contexts, mindfulness movement, go for it. You see, so it's vantage points, context. So he has a new book out, but you can contact him about that. But in his book about the Rinzai way, where he critiques, it's in a particular context that he's want to demarcate what is the Rinzai way, right? As opposed to what is the Soto way, what is the Buddha Dharma, what is Vipassana, what's mindfulness, what's all that. So there's a purpose for it. See?
Yeah.
Just as long as we're clear what the author is trying to do, and his standpoint, and the context, then we will become like fundamentalists.
Yeah.
Fundamentalist Buddhism. This is the way because he says so in the book. It's always contextual. Always contextual. Just keep that in mind.
I love that. It's like a call to keep the mind open as well. I originally found you because of music. which you remember from our first conversation.
Sure.
Have you been, just to close out today, I'm curious if you've been appreciating any music or any art during the last few months. I know you've been extremely busy with Dharma Relief, but have you found any way to take in any art or music or anything that you'd like to talk about for a second?
I've been listening to classical music, to be honest. Classical piano music. And I enjoy that quite.
I'm a huge Rachmaninoff person.
Good. Yeah. So, I haven't had much time to explore that during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But in my free time, I drive or getting groceries or sometime at home, I listen to, subscribe actually to this channel for classical piano.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, Guogu, it has been super fantastic to reconnect with you, to hear about the amazing work you're doing with Dharma Relief 1 and your forthcoming Dharma Relief 2, as well as the upcoming release in a physical book for the Essence of Chan through Shambhala. I'm really grateful to you for your time and your consistent support of this show and your interest in appearing here and talking to the audience of listeners who tune in. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for me for the last couple of years. It means a lot that you're willing to come back and hang out with me. Do you have a website or something that you would direct listeners to if they want to know more about the projects that you've mentioned today?
Dharma Relief 1, there's a project. DR2, we don't have a website yet. But if you were to Google Dharma Relief, you will see the work that we have done, the masks, the PPEs. And DR2 website will come out soon enough. For the Tallahassee Chan Center, you can easily Google that. That will lead to our YouTube channel, Facebook, and so on. So there's a lot of, one thing fascinating is my students have been bugging me. Students not in Florida, but elsewhere, because they only come for intensive retreats once a year, twice a year.
Yeah.
They do these kind of online sittings. It was very fashionable. This is before COVID-19. Online sitting. I said, why would anyone want to sit in front of a camera? Of me sitting, the camera watching me sit. It's just so self-referential to me. Why would anyone want to do that? So a lot of people do that. A lot of teachers do that. We can sit together. I'm like, sit together. Anyway, I got convinced into doing that because of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Everything went online. All Dharma Center's activities went online. So as a result of that, there are sittings online, there are talks online, and they're all recorded. So our YouTube channel has a lot of that. So
Awesome.
It's easy to explore.
Great. Well, I will put some links for the listeners in the show notes. Guogu, thank you so much for coming back. It's been a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Grateful for the opportunity.
Classical Ideas is produced by me, Greg Soden. Music on Classical Ideas is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. You can find his music at www.wearewarmmusic.com. If you like this show, please rate it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email me at classicalideas@outlook.com. Or find me on Patreon at patreon.com/classicalideaspodcast. Thanks so much for listening.